Hello, everybody, and welcome into Chattahoochee Sports Talk. Today, we're breaking down the top Week 1 matchups for the college football season. I'm Cayden Sturgis. Joining me today, very special guest, first guest of the show. Welcome in Case Thompson to the booth, everybody.
I'm absolutely honored to be here. Talking some college football, been foaming at the mouth, just ready to see some contact, see some points scored, see some defense locked down, and let's get this season kicked off and underway.
Okay, well, let's start it off. On Thursday night, the Backyard Brawl returns. I think it's the first time it's been played since 2011. It's been over 10 years. And Pitt coming off a season that is historic, basically. They haven't been that good since Dan Marino was there. And West Virginia have been on a little bit of a downturn lately, but I think they have some hope for the future. Pitt is a 7.5-point favorite in this game. So
I don't know. I'm just feeling Pitt 100% win and cover. I mean, come on. Let's be honest with ourselves. Yes, Pitt lost Kenny Pickett to the draft. Jordan Addison to USC. That's tough. But that's still just – it's one of those hard-nosed programs. They beat Tennessee last year. That was a tough loss to watch because we should have had that game. But they win and cover. What do you think?
See, I think the opposite. I like West Virginia a lot this year. The Big 12 is wide open. And you see, Kenan Slovis is not going to be Kenny Pickett. And losing Addison.
No, but he doesn't need to be Kenny Pickett, though.
But West Virginia is going to get JT Daniels, which is another storyline here. These are former USC teammates facing off against each other in a pretty heated rivalry, even though it's been dormant for the last few years. And I just think West Virginia wins. I just think that they have a lot of momentum behind them, and Pitt might be lost without a bunch of its leaders.
All right. Well, when you're wrong, just make sure to credit me that I did pick Pitt to win and cover because that's the correct call for this game. I'm going to put it out there. That's the correct call right now.
Of course, always. Okay, and then we move on to the other Thursday night showdown between Penn State. They're headed to Indiana to play Purdue. Purdue is a 3.5-point underdog at home, and we know the Boilermakers absolutely love being a home underdog against Big Ten East opponents. So, Penn State's going in there. Many consider it a disappointment of a season last year. And James Franklin, he got extended. He used the LSU job. He used all of these different opportunities to get himself paid. We love a hustler on this show, and we will always appreciate that. But the thing that everyone forgets is that Penn State was a top 5 team last year until their quarterback got hurt at Iowa. They should have won that game. And if they beat Iowa, if they don't collapse down the stretch without a quarterback because Sean Clifford's out, then Penn State's a much better team. I like Penn State a lot this year, personally. I don't know if they'll be able to beat the big boys in the Big Ten, but they should be that third team pretty easily. But I love the environment for Purdue. Purdue, scrappy young bunch. And it's hard to go in there and get a W. But I think Penn State does. I think the Nittany Lions win, but Purdue covers the 3.5. So I think it's a very close matchup. Probably the best matchup of the night, as much as I love West Virginia and Pitt. And I'll take the Nittany Lions.
See, I mean, there's got to be a little disrespect for the Boilermakers here. I mean, just a little bit. At home, I mean, they're only plus 3.5. I mean, that's basically, let's call it a wash. Let's call it a 6.5-point spread because home team normally gets 3.5. Let's just call it that. But, I mean, Purdue has it. They have a good enough team to beat Penn State. At home, week 1, they don't lose. They win and cover. Start 1-0.
Okay, so those are the games that we get to kick off college football with. And then let's head out west to the Mile High State. TCU at Colorado with the Horned Frogs, a 13.5-point favorite. TCU loses their longtime head coach And I think more importantly, they lose Zach Evans. He's at Ole Miss now. I love him as a Rebel, by the way. But,
I mean, how could you not?
yeah, TCU, perennial dark horse. But I think this year, Colorado just too weak in a weaker conference. And it's week 1, so none of that matters. You just got to play the one team on your schedule that week. But I like TCU to cover here and win.
I like TCU to win, but personally, I don't know. There's something about this Colorado team that just is catching my eye. I'm just going to go for it. It's a week 1 pick. Let's call it Colorado to cover, TCU to win.
That sounds good. So we go to the Monday night game here. This is in Atlanta, but not at Grant Field. It's at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Number 4, Clemson rolls on into Atlanta to play Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, in what is essentially a home game, is a 22-point dog. And yes, Clemson struggled last year, but it was relative. Like, Clemson won 10 games last year. Can you believe that with how people are talking about them?
No, I mean, Clemson is being talked about as a 6-win team right now. And sometimes it's hard to not look at them at that after what they've been through recently. I mean, after the departure of Trevor Lawrence, it's felt a little disorganized in that program. And it's hard not to look at them as almost a rebuilder. But, I mean, we got to remember, this is Clemson, baby. I mean, they have players. They always have players. So no matter who's on that roster, you get Dabo out there. Originally, I thought that Georgia Tech was going to cover the 22.5. But honestly, give me Clemson to win and cover.
See, that's an interesting line of thinking because Dabo lost a little bit of talent, but the offense was always holding them back last year. Truth be told, Clemson's defense was almost as good as Georgia's last year, and it kept them in games that they really didn't have much business being in looking at their offensive stats. DJ Uiagalelei, he was shaky at times last year, and at times, I mean the whole season. He never showed his promise as Trevor Lawrence's successor. And we'll see, because Dabo loses Brent Venables, and I still expect that defense to be good, but is it going to be as good?
I guess I'm just thinking, let's give DJ some of the leeway we give some other college football players. Because if you sit down and think about it, he's got an opportunity this season. No doubt about it. He can either prove himself to be Trevor Lawrence, a generational talent successor, or he's going to show us what a lot of people think he is, which is nothing.
And I think it'll be interesting in this game because I don't think Georgia Tech wins. I like the direction Georgia Tech is going in. I like some of the things we've heard out of camp, especially like you hear what Bryce Kuhn says every day up there as he's covering the Georgia Tech beat. And they seem to be in a good place, at least relative to what they've been under Jeff Collins, at least mentally. But the best laid plans all fly out the window whenever you get punched in the face. And I don't know if Georgia Tech is going to be able to take those first few punches, but I think it gets really interesting if they do. I think we're going to find out in the first quarter how long of a leash DJU has, because Cade Klubnik's right there on the bench. He's a 5-star. He's expected to be that guy. We know from his high school film he is that guy. And that's pressure. And pressure
should be that guy. He should be that guy.
And pressure it's a funny thing. Pressure can make a diamond. But pressure also softens the potato. So, we might not find out this week, but best believe we will find out if DJU is a piece of coal and turns into a diamond, or if he's just a potato that will soften right up. Okay, and so that brings us into number 24 Houston rolling in to UT San Antonio and the Roadrunners are a 4-point underdog in their own building here. It's hard not to love Houston. UTSA, fun story from last year. The Roadrunners, they were America's sweethearts. It's not going to happen again. That just isn't repeatable at the Conference USA level. And Houston could be what Cincinnati was last year. I don't think the rest of the country is going to allow them to achieve that, but I think Houston is probably going to be the best group of 5 team in the country.
They have the roster potential.
Right, and the way the American team seems to just rotate. It's UCF's reign for 2 years. Cincinnati's reign for 2 years. Houston looks to be able to fill in that role, especially with all the talent Cincinnati's losing. I love Houston here, and I love them for the rest of the season.
I mean, I love Houston to cover, let's say, 10.5. I mean, what's the line here?
4.
4, yeah. Give me 10.5 on Houston.
I love Houston. I think Houston probably wins this by 2 touchdowns, at least, in my opinion. Hey, and if that comes back to bite me, I expect all the smoke from Road Runner Nation. But until then, we'll see. The last of our matinee games, even though this is a Sunday night game, in New Orleans, Florida State goes to the Bayou Bengals. And LSU is a 3-point favorite in their own backyard. Somehow this is a neutral site game, but really it's an LSU home game in the Superdome. And this is an interesting one. I was going back and forth on this. I think we were talking to the studio before we started recording, and I told you, I really don't know who's going to win this game, but I don't think it's going to be close either way. I like Mike Norvell's regime. I watched them last week, and they looked good, but you have to take into account the level of competition they were playing, and I just don't think that holds up. But the extra week just helping you get game time, just the timing of a game down, really helps you. All that being said, I love LSU, at least in this game at early on in the season. The Brian Kelly era, I think, gets off to a hot start, and LSU wins and covers.
It's interesting. LSU they're always hard to pick. Okay, LSU's always good. They're always going to have athletes. We got that, right? But I mean, they got a team. I mean, let's not sleep on them. Okay, this is a real program that wants to win, has a feeling to win, and we've seen them do it. I mean, no question. LSU, though, I got to give them the slight edge. Recruiting, they had that X factor in recruiting where they're just able to find these athletes that no matter how many stars, they make contributions to this football team. And so give me LSU to win. But I think FSU is able to cover here.
Okay, we'll see. I really like FSU to make a leap forward this year. I think Mike Norvell is going to keep his job, and I think that Florida State fans are going to feel silly that they even questioned it. I think it's a long process because Jimbo left that program in complete disarray. And we'll see. We're going to move on to our possible upsets of the week. And these are upsets that no one is talking about. We're not talking about Georgia State going up to South Carolina. We're not talking about North Carolina State and ECU. We're talking about things that no one is considering. But we wouldn't be shocked if it happened. So I'm going to give you 3 games, Case. And you got to tell me, if you had to put money on one of these, which one you taking? Outright dog, not the spread. So we got South Dakota State, the Jackrabbits, going to Iowa to play the Hawkeyes. You like that at all? You want any action on that?
I'm personally a fan of Iowa this season. I think they got a team. They're getting a win week 1. There's no doubt in my mind they don't come out of week 1 1-0. I mean, just not a chance.
Okay, well, we're going to take another team that people are high on in the preseason. This was Desmond Howard's national champion in the preseason. Sam Houston, the Bearcats, go to Texas A&M. Sam Houston, pretty good FCS team. They're moving up to the FBS in just a few short years. They've won a natty in the last 2 years. Do you think they hang with Jimbo's Aggies?
I mean, maybe hang, but I mean, at Texas A&M, it's not going to happen. It's not in the cards for them. I mean, maybe there's a situation where it might be plausible. I mean, who knows? College football is a world where anything can happen. We've seen that time and time again. I mean, that is a lesson that is burned into our brains, but not this time. Not this time.
And then I think this is probably my favorite because, as everyone knows who's ever been on Twitter, it's college football season, so it's time to pick on Scott Frost's Nebraska. And so Nebraska, tough loss in another one-possession game, this time in Ireland against Northwestern, a team that they blew out last year. And North Dakota comes in to Lincoln. So, Nebraska, long flight home from Ireland, both figuratively and literally. It must have sucked getting on that plane. I'm kind of surprised that Scott Frost wasn't just hanging on to the wing to get back to the States. Do you think that the Fighting Sioux can pull off the upset that realistically would end Scott Frost's tenure, if it isn't already?
I think it's 100% possible. I don't think you can look at this Nebraska team and look at Scott Frost, what they did last season, as a 3-9 team, right? If I'm correct.
They were Yeah, they were in a lot of close games. They were 3-9 overall. Some would say the best 3-9 team ever. But Scott Frost cannot win close matchups. He has proven time and time again that he is really, really good at keeping the game close and not very good at winning in it. It's a shame. Nebraska has a talented roster. And Casey Thompson, I think, is a pretty good quarterback. But they just don't have a backbone. And they can't stand up. And I don't think it's a roster issue anymore. I think it's a culture issue down there. And I think that starts at the top.
It 100% starts with Scott Frost, because you could argue, I mean, they get frosty as soon as the game gets hard. Whenever that moment comes, when it's time for Nebraska to look at themselves and say, hey, we're either going to find the way to win this game or we're going to do what we've been doing, I mean, they stick to what they know, and that's losing games that they should win. And unfortunately, I mean, Nebraska should be an easy win here, but we don't have that luxury of just saying Scott Frost should win a game that he should win. We don't.
There are no slam dunks anymore. There's no slam dunks when you can't jump high enough off the ground to touch the rim.
Where did he build the trust that he can win games?
Well, he's from Nebraska, so that's why they like him. But he won, well, some would call it a national championship at Central Florida. I wouldn't personally, but, you know, whatever. And I think some programs like Nebraska have convinced themselves in the playoff era with how much money is being infused in the sport that they can't compete anymore. And I just don't think that's true. Like, there's no excuse for Nebraska to not be what Wisconsin is or Iowa is, because they have more history than either of those teams, and they're in the exact same situation, except they're infinitely worse. Because I can count on Iowa or Wisconsin to win a close game against a really good team. I can count on Minnesota to do the same. But Nebraska, I can't trust with North Dakota. Like, how did they fall this far?
And in the new landscape of college football, everything is changing right now. Anybody can turn into a winning franchise right now. I mean, arguably. Granted, a lot of things would have to happen, but there's opportunity, and you see some teams seizing the opportunity, and you see some teams frail and get scared of the opportunity of possibly being a dominant college football team. And we're going to see a shift. Some teams will stay, some teams will leave, But college football is changing, and Nebraska is not on the good side of it, frankly, right now.
Ain't that the truth? Well, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back with our 4 games of the week. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Chattahoochee Sports Talk. Now we're moving into our games of the week. Okay, these are our marquee matchups that we really got something to say. So, Cayden, what are you feeling? What's your number one? Let's hear it.
Okay, so it's not my number one matchup of the week. Well, yeah, it is. I don't think it's going to have all the eyeballs on it. But Cincinnati and Arkansas. If you're a college football fan, how do you not love this matchup? It is a playoff team from last year. A group of 5 teams. A team with a chip on their shoulder still. Going into an SEC stadium week 1 to play the Arkansas Razorbacks. A team that I think a lot of people are high on this year. I love Sam Pittman. Both what he's doing for the program down there and him as a person. He just feels like the right fit for Arkansas.
He really, really does. Sam Pittman is, I just feel like right now, the ideal quarterback Arkansas needs. Yes, lost Traylon Burks. Huge offensive weapon. But, I mean, Cincinnati, they lost way more. I mean, just losing Sauce alone, not allowing a single touchdown in the college career, I mean, that's huge.
And even if you just lost Sauce, that would be something that you could overcome. But then you lost Kobe Bryant too. That's 2 top corners. And will Arkansas be able to exploit that? I mean, maybe. They should be able to throw the ball. They were able to do it last year.
If you like Sam Pittman, I think you like Arkansas in this game.
And not to mention, Arkansas returns a lot of production. KJ Jefferson, in particular at quarterback, true dual threat guy. Really, I dare say it, I don't like talking about Heisman, but if Arkansas is where we expect them to be at the end of the year, that's a real dark horse right there, people.
I mean, it's possible. I don't know if I can necessarily call that a dark horse. Maybe there's an opportunity there. Maybe. I don't know if I see it right now. But I do like Arkansas to win and cover this game.
And I think the reason is we talked about them losing both Kobe and Sauce. But they also lose Desmond Ridder. And it's unfair to think of Cincinnati as a group of 5 team, when in reality they're more like a Big 12 team. They're a very good football team. They recruit on the level of a Power 5 team. But that's a really good Arkansas team. And you saw what Bama did to them. They had Bryce Young. They had the best quarterback in the country last year, and they really didn't even throw the ball. They just said, okay, we're going to run it down your throat now. And nothing tells me that Arkansas just can't do the same thing. Arkansas could bully people in the SEC. I think that they could bully Cincinnati. As much as I love Cincinnati, I think Arkansas is just the better team here. And that's not even considering home field advantage. Because you know that those boys and girls in Fayetteville, it's the start of the season. There's hope for the Hogs. They're going to be liquored up and ready to go.
I just think there's no way I don't take the Hogs here. If Cincinnati comes out and they win this game week 1, y'all got my respect. 100%. I don't see it happening, but man, as just a college football fan, I would love to see it happen. I really would.
And that moves us into another SEC home game that's out of conference. This time, though, Utah, number 7 in the AP poll, goes into Gainesville, into the swamp, to play the Florida Gators. And this will be the first time we see Billy Napier's Gators in action.
Billy Napier, solid hire. Got great potential to work out. But after the Dan Mullen departure and the mass exodus at Florida, there's going to be consequences. There are going to be consequences, and this Utah team is going to come in ready to play. I mean, number 7 in the AP poll, they're ready for Florida. They are ready for Florida, and I just don't think there's a shot Florida's ready for Utah.
Florida isn't going to back down from a fight. Florida is going to be ready to go. I think Billy Napier is going to be instilling a good culture. But it's really the same thing we've talked about in the past, especially what we've seen with Utah playing Oregon. Yeah, you can be a good team. You can have a good culture, but if you get smacked in the mouth a little bit, I don't think that really matters that much. And if you don't have a good culture in place, once you get smacked in the mouth, that's over. You're over with. You don't have a response to it. And we've seen in the past, Florida's been a very undisciplined program.
It's hard not to like Anthony Richardson. I mean, we've seen the talent. The talent's there. Let's just look at the Florida-Alabama game last year. Like, he was literally the perfect quarterback for that game. But culture matters. Head coaching matters. Everything matters in college football to instill a winning program. And I just don't think they're going to be there week one. I think it's going to take maybe a couple games or, maybe a couple seasons. It's just they're not ready for Utah.
In Utah, Kyle Whittingham is the most tenured head coach in the Power 5. I just don't see Florida, especially overcoming how bad it was under Dan Mullen for the last really year. That team quit on him 2 years in a row, and I just don't see them being able to get up for it, no matter how much they love Billy Napier. I like that hire for Florida, but they were so behind everyone in the country, much less Utah, who is ahead of a lot of teams. And I don't underestimate the swamp, and I don't underestimate Florida's talent. I just think Utah is going to be the more disciplined team. I don't think they're going to lose the game. I think that they might not win it, but I think that Florida is much more likely to lose this game than actually be able to take it.
I definitely agree, and I think there's a huge chance that as the season goes on, Florida will get exponentially better. But it just really depends on how efficiently Billy Napier is able to establish his culture, his way of winning, and be able to run his team like at a program at Florida. He's got to get the keys to the kingdom, and he's got to get players to buy in. I mean, that's all he needs. It might take some time, and so that's why I'm on Utah.
And I think this is a very similar situation to how Texas is, to a much lesser extent. But we saw Texas last year. They couldn't win close games, and once you smacked them in the mouth, they did not know how to get back up. And we all know the famous, now leaked bus audio where, well, we can't say it on this show because we're family friendly, but, you know, it might take a moment like that for Florida to get their stuff together. And I think it's going to take time. I think that this first year, I think they'll make a bowl game, but I don't know how good they'll be, at least for their standards down at Florida. I think this is going to be a wash year. And then you'll really see with recruiting in this next cycle, I think you'll really start to see how Billy Napier's Gators will look in the 2023 season.
Yeah, I mean, they need a good cycle this year. They got to get one just to get that foot planted and get a good, strong foothold on pushing into the future.
I do agree. Okay, and this is ESPN's Game of the Week. Number 5, Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish go into the Horseshoe to play the second-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. The Buckeyes, with C.J. Stroud leading them, are a 17-point favorite at home.
Personally, for me, I might be more heavily on the favorites this week, and I mean that's one of those things. But I think C.J. Stroud, he's ready to play. He's ready for the moment. He's ready to show the world that he should be the number 1 overall pick this year. No question. Ohio State's going to have a great team. Notre Dame going to have a great team. But I think C.J. Stroud is the X factor, and he is going to be the reason that Ohio State wins and covers easily.
Not even to mention Jackson Smith and Jigba. We saw what those two players had last year in the Rose Bowl game against Utah, and that's a good Utah team. Though they were playing running backs at linebacker, so it's not really an accurate representation, but still, Ohio State's going to have an explosive offense.
Electricity on the field.
They bring in Jim Knowles as a defensive coordinator to try to address some of the issues that were exploited by teams like Oregon and Michigan last year. The question is, just like with Florida, is there going to be enough time to implement those changes?
And enough talent to implement those changes.
Well, Ohio State's going to have the talent. They have top 5 recruiting classes every year. They're going to have the talent to do whatever they want. It's just whether or not they will be challenged early enough in the season. Does Notre Dame's offense meet the freeze point? Like, are they going to be able to? Well, maybe not the freeze point. That's how I refer to defenses, stopping offenses, because doesn't matter if you're 33 degrees or 78 degrees. You're not going to make anything freeze. But at 32, it starts to cool down a little bit, and it starts to get rough. But 33 to 78, exact same. It's going to look the exact same. But with Notre Dame, to get through that Ohio State defense, are they going to meet the thaw factor? Are they going to be able to thaw out that Ohio State defense? Because I think they will. I don't know how well they'll be able to throw the ball. But Marcus Freeman, he's got those boys playing for him. They love him there. And honestly, I don't know if Ohio State has fixed some of those issues that Michigan especially exploited and Oregon exploited. And we saw how weak of a team Oregon was up front when they played Utah and Oklahoma last year in the bowl game. And Notre Dame, if they're not anything, they're going to run the ball well, and they're going to be formidable on the front lines.
See, those are all great points, but unfortunately, that's just not going to happen. Okay? I mean, C.J. Stroud, he is coming to play. He will be the single reason that they win this game. I believe this is where we see another level of C.J. Stroud. And just the dominance to push Ohio State past a possibly tough Notre Dame team easily.
Yeah, and I have Ohio State winning this game. But I have Notre Dame covering. I think that Notre Dame's will be able to pound the ball, will be able to hog time of possession, but I just don't trust their secondary against these types of receivers. Because Ohio State has probably the deepest receiving core in the country, and Jackson Smith and Jigba is headlining that, and I just don't see Notre Dame being able to have the depth in the secondary to be able to cover that for the whole game. It's going to, maybe they can keep it close for a half, but I think that eventually Ohio State's going to just overwhelm them. I think Notre Dame will be able to keep up by just slowing the game down when they have the ball, but we'll see. I think Ohio State gets the win. And that'll bring us into our last game, our game of the week, as the number 11 ranked Oregon Ducks roll into Mercedes-Benz Stadium to take on the reigning national champion Georgia Bulldogs. I've been waiting a long time to say that. And the Bulldogs, a 17-point favorite in their backyard in Atlanta. So, what do you think about this one, Case?
This one's unfortunately not tough for me. I hate to say it, but I mean, Georgia wins and covers. Do we really got to talk about this? They're going to do it. It's game one, right off a natty. I mean, if Georgia can't win this game, what is that program even? They got it. No question.
Well, LSU lost a game immediately to Mississippi State after that run they had in 2019. And it was because they lost the side of the ball that, basically the entire side of the ball that won them the national title. Because even though Jamar Chase didn't graduate, he just decided, I'm not going to play. And so they lost the whole team that won them a national title, except for Derek Stingley. And you could say that the side of the ball that won Georgia a title, it's not here anymore. The biggest holdout on defense is Jalen Carter, and he might end up being the best player. And while Georgia has rotational pieces on defense from last year, they're going to be inexperienced on the defense. But it's Georgia. They recruit 5 stars and 4 stars. They're going to be one of, if not the most talented team in the country. They're certainly going to be the most talented team in this matchup. And with Oregon, I love the Dan Lanning hire. I think that's a good step for them to play the way that they want to play. They don't want to play Western football. They want to play a Big Ten SEC style of hard-nosed, knock-you-around football. And that was something that they tried to get under Cristobal, but it was just something that wasn't there at times last year. It was when they went into the Horseshoe to play Ohio State, but I can't get that Utah game out of my head. And Oregon might be able to stay with Georgia for a half, but Georgia in the trenches, and we're not even bringing in the tight end room. We're not even talking about Brock Bowers or Eric Gilbert or Darnell Washington. All 3 of them. And Georgia has receiving talent, and we should see a heavily renovated offense. And if not, Georgia's talented enough to just lean on you. And over time, they'll just run the ball right down your throat. And Stetson Bennett, for all his distractors, he very, very rarely loses you a game. He might not go out and win it. He might not go out and beat a top 5, top 6, or 7 team in the country. But Stetson Bennett doesn't lose games like this, typically. He's very, very efficient, and he doesn't make many mistakes. And I just don't see Oregon beating Georgia without a lot of mistakes, because Bo Nix, he's feast or famine. But I trust Stetson Bennett not to lose this game than I trust Bo Nix to go out and win it for Oregon.
100%. And you have to like Georgia to just win this game. But I guess my question is we've talked about the departures on defense, and there's a few. When do you think Georgia finally starts to feel some suffering from these departures? Because maybe it's not week 1 at Oregon, but, I mean, they're going to feel some talent gone. I mean, we're going to see the defense possibly regress just a little bit. When do you think that point is?
I think that's here. You're going to see the difference. I think Oregon's going to be able to run the ball a little, and we'll see if that's a reoccurring issue, but Georgia's not going to repeat really 3 years in a row with great defenses. And that's been Kirby Smart's MO wherever he goes. He's going to have just a suffocating defense, but last year was historic. And Georgia's just not going to be able to replicate that right off the bat. But I think they're still going to be a top 3 defense in the country. And,
well,
I mean, why shouldn't they be? They have the best defensive head coach, and they have just crazy talent.
Crazy talent is always for sure. But, I mean, just to come right off the bat after all those departures, top 3, really?
And you lose Dan Lanning. Of course, he's at Oregon now, but Will Muschamp takes that role. And
does Dan Lanning scare you at Oregon at all?
No, because I just don't think that Oregon necessarily has the tools to exploit Georgia. Like, even defensively, even with this will be the weakest we see Georgia all season defensively. They should get nothing but better with how young they are. But I just don't know if Oregon's really going to be able to be in a position to exploit it, because I think they might be playing from behind the whole game. Because I don't know if Oregon's secondary can hang with Georgia's physical wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
And
Georgia's known for playing that hard-nosed football.
Right, and I can't believe I just said it. I can't believe I just said something about our receivers outclassing a top 15 secondary in the country. And we'll be able to run the ball. We'll be able to run the ball on anybody, except for probably Alabama and Ohio State, maybe Clemson. But Georgia can do it all, and I think that their offense will carry them a little bit this season to give time for the defense to adapt. And so for that reason, I think Georgia wins and covers, and I don't think it's really close after about a quarter and a half.
I'm gonna have to agree. Georgia wins and covers. I I do agree. We need to watch from regression for Georgia, because I think we're going to see a lot week one that can give us a lot of insight to what this team can do this season. I mean, it's impossible not to say they're a national championship contender, but also you can't say that you can't expect minor to possible major regressions from this offense and defense. And
Well, you can expect regression from the defense. I think the offense is going to take a step forward. You lost a few players along the offensive line. You lost Zamir White and James Cook, but you return a majority of your receivers. You return your quarterback, and you keep your offensive coordinator.
George Pickens as well, another departure.
George Pickens as well, but you have to remember, George Pickens didn't play a majority of last year. And even when he came back for the SEC title game and the playoffs, he wasn't himself. So I really don't see that as much of a departure because he wasn't on the team for much of last season. So
personally, I was just look at talent leaving. Talent is talent, especially in college football. I mean, you never have enough of it, and no matter when it happens or how much of a part they played, it still always hurts when they leave. I personally think there's more chance for regression on the offense, but they got this one.
Yeah, I don't think Georgia will be challenged truly. They go up to Williams-Brice Stadium to play the Gamecocks the third week of the season. That might be challenging, even though it's not a night game. And then I think after that, their most challenging matchups are in Starkville against Mississippi State, maybe at... No, Tennessee comes to Athens this year. But Tennessee's offense will give Georgia problems. But I just don't know. I think Georgia is going to lose a game at some point. I just don't think it's going to be here. So that wraps up our games of the week. And that'll wrap up our week one preview. So, it's been fun having you here, Case. Hope to have you back in the future.
It's been 100% a pleasure, and I would kick myself for a long time if I didn't get this in here. But real quick, the Vols, okay? I mean, they're going to be a good team, right? I mean, just give me a little fun as the guest on the show. Help me sleep better tonight.
Well, you have Hendon Hooker. And Hendon Hooker, I don't think it's a stretch to say he's becoming not necessarily a favorite for the Heisman consideration, but you just look at how he played last year. He had to win the job in the season last year. And that program just seems to be heading in the right direction. I don't know necessarily how good they'll be record-wise, but I can tell you they'll be a better football team this year than they were last year. That offense is going to give teams fits, and that includes Alabama and Georgia. You can turn those Alabama and Georgia games into track meets now, and that's how you have to beat those two teams. Because I don't know if I trust Tennessee defensively yet, but I think that they can.
They're making progress.
They're making good progress. I think that they'll slip up somewhere they're not supposed to because having a high-powered offense like that leads you to slipping up somewhere you're not really supposed to. But it does mean you could beat anybody at any given time. It's kind of like Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. He can beat Alabama if he wants to. Well, I mean, he really, really wants to. But, I mean, he can slip up and beat Alabama or Texas A&M. But Ole Miss loses to, weird teams because they're not consistent week to week, and I think you're going to see a lot of that in Tennessee, where it's the stick through the bicycle spoke, where the offense, when it's going, it's good, but it doesn't have a handbrake on the offense. It's either full speed ahead or someone just jammed a log in the bicycle spoke, and suddenly you're thrown over the handlebars and you can't go anywhere. So,
call me delusional, motivated, determined. I mean, whatever you want to call me crazy. But the Vols are going to have a good season. I appreciate being on the show. It's been an absolute blast. Let's go. Go Big Orange. Go Vols. College football is back, baby. Thanks for having me.
And there you have it, folks. According to Case Thompson, Big Orange is back. And that concludes our Week 1 preview for the 2022 college football season. Don't be a casual. And tune in to Chattahoochee Sports Talk. This is your host, Cayden Sturgis, signing off.